What's going on? It's Kevin Kenny. This is the Build Series live here in New York City. And we're going to kick off the week with a rock and roll Hall of Famer who is back right now with a new album, a new tour, and someone that I personally consider possibly the Forrest Gump of rock and roll. I'll explain that in just a little bit. But first, let's give a warm build welcome to Don Felder. Thanks for coming by.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you're a busy man. We were talking while the video played here in the studio. You were in Atlantic City on Saturday. You're going to be doing a cool little event here in Midtown Manhattan at the Cutting Room tonight. How's it feel to be back? I mean, the record's out.
Well, you know, it's ironic because I moved to New York with a guitar in one hand and a suitcase in the other hand in 1968.
Wow.
And the first thing I did when I got to New York City the next day was I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, because in Gainesville, Florida, they don't have anything like that at all. And it turns out that, 50 years later, my guitar is hanging on the walls of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. What an honor it is.
Oh, yeah, round of applause. And it's gonna be, and it's this guitar, I understand.
That's exactly right. It's that guitar.
And it's in good company, Don. You got Jimi Hendrix's Woodstock guitar.
Yeah.
You got Ringo Starr's drum set from the Ed Sullivan Show, the first time the Beatles were ever on American television.
Yeah.
You think about those big moments. Were there any big moments for you as a kid?
As a kid,
Yeah,
I
mean,
saw
you talk about-
Ed Sullivan's show, and Elvis Presley was on the Ed Sullivan Show. I think I was about 9 or 10 years old.
Okay. And your parents let you watch?
Yeah, just rocking and, doing his thing, gyrations, and all the girls screaming at him. And I went, I think I'd like to do that. That looks like fun.
It's funny because now rock and roll, the name of the album, American Rock and Roll, it's really the foundation, it's the bedrock, no pun intended, of all popular music now. But at one point in time, the time you were referring to right there with Elvis and the Beatles, it was so new. Right, it's hard for a younger music fan to appreciate just how unprecedented that music was. Can you try to articulate or capture what the feeling was when you saw Elvis for the first time?
Well, yeah, I mean, the excitement that was on television actually just reverberated worldwide. Elvis became one of the biggest rock and roll stars in history, I think. But the key thing that influenced me the most was I was one of the 400,000 people at Woodstock in 1969.
You were there.
Soaking wet, mud, everything, seeing Jimi Hendrix play live, Santana play live, Grateful Dead play live, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young live, and the reverberation of that event really just covered the whole world, the fallout from it, and it propelled all of those artists that are on this record, American Rock and Roll, at one time were influenced by those artists that were at that venue. As a matter of fact, there's a line in the Hotel California record, there hasn't been that spirit here since 1969. That's talking about Woodstock and how it just exploded on the rock scene.
Why New York in 1968? Because, you're in Gainesville. Of course, you want to branch out to a major market. But I would think like San Francisco would be the place to be for someone trying to make rock and roll music in 1968.
Well, what had happened is a band called The Circle that was managed by a huge guy here in New York called Sid Bernstein, who brought the Rolling Stones over to the United States the first time, had seen my band and brought us up to New York City and showcased us around in some clubs and whatnot. So I had a connection with New York, and I had no friends at all in California at the time. So I put together another band and moved to New York here and starved on the streets here for a year and a half, made my first record, played the Fillmore East here, and finally decided I wanted to move to Boston and worked in a studio there for $50 a week, 6 days a week. But I learned how to make records. Every day I was in the studio recording, playing, producing, engineering. And it was just, if you went to a college today to study how to make records and engineer, it cost you $50,000 a semester to go. Yeah. So I think I got a good deal. I got paid $50 a week to learn how to make records.
You figured it out.
Yeah.
I joked at the top while you were in the back that you could be the Forrest Gump of rock and roll. And I don't know if you've ever gotten that before.
You never know what's life. It's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
You remember Forrest Gump, the movie, he just finds himself in all these historical instances, throughout American history. And when you read about you and your journey, I mean, it's really, it's akin to that. You taught Tom Petty how to play guitar back in Gainesville, Florida?
Yeah, I did. I started myself at 10 learning how to play guitar after seeing Elvis Presley. We didn't have any money for guitar lessons. There wasn't a music school there to learn from. So eventually I got good enough and a music store opened up and they hired me to teach all these young kids that came in that got guitars for Christmas where their fingers were hurting how to play guitar. And after a couple of years, Tom Petty came in, and he was kind of this scrawny, buck-teeth, just kind of rugged-looking guy, and wanted guitar lessons. He was playing bass in this band called the Epics at the time, and so I taught him there in the store, and then I went out to his house a couple of times for their garage band rehearsal and went to some shows and just kind of helped them put together their show early on. And then, ironically enough, Dwayne Allman from the Allman Brothers taught me how to play slide. They were down there at the same time. Stephen Stills and I had a band together when we were 14, 15 years old for about a year and a half. When Stephen left to move to California, Bernie Ledden, who became one of the founders for the Eagles, moved to California, or moved to L.A., moved to Gainesville, and actually played in my band, replaced Stephen Stills. And the Leonard Skinner was about 60 miles away, about an hour away, so there was just an unusual number of people in that one little area that went on to be platinum-selling artists, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame stars, and all that stuff in one little area.
It's amazing. It's almost like a little scene down there in Gainesville.
Somebody says, well, what do you think was in the water down there? And I don't know if it was that or just the friendly, loving competition to be the best we could be. And, you know, I was in battles of the bands with Petty against Petty and with the Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner. And I'm happy to say I've lost every single battle in the band to the Allman Brothers. The Allman Brothers were by far the best band in that part of the world. Oh, they were great, yeah.
Just getting back to Petty really quick, when you think back, and I know it's a couple of years back, what was it about him at that time period that you think made him successful? Was it work ethic? Was it just raw talent? Like, what was it that, you know, because now he's a legend, of course.
Tom had, when he walked on stage, even playing bass in this little band, the Epics, he had a commitment and just a charisma when he walked out on stage that convinced everybody that was sitting in the audience watching of what he was doing. He just came out with so much self-confidence, and he used to sing kind of like Bob Dylan, that kind of whining thing. Right. It wasn't like a great vocalist. He was playing bass, but people would go, oh my God, he's great. He'd be flipping his hair, and the girls would go, oh my God, he's so cute. And so he had this ability and charisma and dedication to what he was doing that he convinced everybody all the way through his whole career.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, that's sort of whether you want to call it luck or what this Forrest Gump factor you have done, it continued of you just being in these interesting situations, even with the Eagles. I heard you once stumbled upon what you thought, and thank God it wasn't, a dead Keith Richards.
Yeah, we were on the road. We played... Well,
he just launches right in.
It's even hard to tell today if he's alive or dead, to tell you the truth, unless he's got his eyes open or closed, you know. But we were on the road in Kansas City, and we were playing the following night. We had gone in a day early, and I went to see the Stones play, and Tina Turner was actually opening their show and then coming back out and singing with them. And they were staying in the hotel, and our road manager used to be friends with the Stones road manager. So after the show, he said, oh, you want to go up and meet the guys? And I went, of course I'd go up and meet the guys. So we went up and walked down this hallway, and at the end of the hallway, Keith had the presidential suite, and both doors were wide open. Pouring out of the suite was just this loud, thunderous rock and roll track. And we walked in, and on the floor was this guitar plugged into an amp just going, and this track was playing really loud. And we went, Keith, we went walking through his suite, and finally we turned around the corner in his master bedroom, and I saw this foot sticking out of the door in the bathroom and peeked in, and he was face down on the bathroom, and they whisked me out really quickly, and the next thing I knew, the ambulance was showing up, and he was fortunately revived, but I don't know what he had been taking or doing, but he was partying pretty hard.
Incredible. I want to talk about the time you were with the Eagles for just a quick second, and Hotel California specifically, because to me, you wrote the music. By the way, if anyone here doesn't know, you wrote the music to Hotel California, and that's got to be one of, if not the most immersive rock and roll song. You know, it doesn't matter if I'm listening to that in the basement with my buddies in Jersey. Like I'm on a dark desert road. You know, when I'm listening to it. What came first? Was it the music, or was it the lyrics that kind of created that imagery?
I wrote all the music for the track, the music bed, the guitar parts. I'd say about 85-90% of the solos on the ending of it. And I made these demos in this little 4-track studio bedroom I had in Malibu. And I think I wrote 15 or 16 song ideas and put them on cassettes, if anybody still knows what a cassette is. And I gave copies to Don Henley, Glenn Frey, Joe Walsh was in the band, Randy Meisner. I said, if there's anything on this cassette you guys like and you want to finish writing with me, let me know. A couple of days later, I got a call from Henley. He said, I like that song. It sounds kind of like a Mexican reggae. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. So we got in the studio and tracked the whole thing, and turned out that we had recorded it in the original key, which was the wrong key for Don to sing in. We re-recorded it in the right key, and then the take we had really wasn't good enough. We had to go back in for the third time and record that song. Don had written some brilliant lyrics along with Glenn. The idea, none of us were from California, and yet we became the California sound of that particular era. But as you're driving down Route 66 at night, you can see the glow of Los Angeles on the horizon for 100 miles away. And as you're driving, you keep thinking of all the images that you've thought of about California, with the beaches and the sidewalks with the stars on Hollywood Boulevard and bikinis and palm trees and surfing, just all those images that are so ingrained in everybody. And as you go there, you think about that image. So we thought about how we could write a song about entering California. That's where it started, on the Dark Desert Highway. And it turned out to be a comment and kind of the foundation of what that whole album became. Because once you get to California, you become the new kid in town with your first hit. And then after you've had 2 or 3 hits, it becomes life in the fast lane. And you are running way past red line on Learjets and limos and all of that other stuff. And then at points you stop and you say, well, was this really all worth it? All the bars we played in, everything it took to get here? And it becomes wasted time. You know, is that the things you did? So a lot of the songs that came out on that record were based on that original concept of going into California.
So before they put lyrics to that song, when you're writing the music to it, what are you picturing? Are you picturing the same thing that Don and Glenn came up with, or did you initially have a different idea for that song?
I didn't have a lyric concept. I was trying to write a track that Joe and I could play on. Joe and I used to go out and jam together in Joe Walsh and Friends. You can see some of those old videos on YouTube. Had a ball doing that, and he had just joined the band, so I wanted to write a music bed that Joe and I could trade off and play on. So that's really where the motivation was to write that song. And then Don and Glenn came up after they heard the demo about that whole idea of the lyrics.
Do you ever think about lyrics when you're writing music, though? You must think of concepts, right? With just music, sounds, they all make us feel certain things.
Well, sometimes the lyrics come first, sometimes guitar parts come first, sometimes a groove comes first, and I record all these little pieces, much like you would have an idea in a dream, and you wake up in the middle of the night, I got to write this down, or else in the morning I'll wake up and I won't remember it. So I record little snippets, whether it's on my iPhone or if I'm watching a movie on television, a film score goes by and you go, wow, that was a beautiful orchestral chord change. What is that? And you back up and get a guitar and you figure out what it is, and then you record a little piece of it, and that would be a great bridge that would go into a ballad, just the chord change. So I'm constantly trying to collect these little pieces of lyrics, vocals, chord ideas, guitar licks, and store them away, so when I finally have time to sit down in the studio and work and put together a track, I have little piece ideas to build on.
Right. You're often credited historically with injecting rock into the Eagles, right? They were more or less a country-esque band before you came along. Do you remember, was that a credibility thing? Were they trying to almost be cooler because rock was so hot at the time? It's almost like today, like a pop singer might throw like a rapper on a guest verse, right? Was it a credibility thing, or was it trying to get radio airplay because it was a bit easier back then if you were a rock band versus country? What was the...
Well, they had hits like Peaceful Easy Feeling, Take
Right.
It Easy, which were really country-based songs. And AM radio was really shifting towards R&B, more rock and roll, things like that had a heavier edge to it. And so to follow the airplay pattern, they wanted to have, more rock and roll in their songs. So I was brought in to bring kind of the edge to the band, and that was my job. The first thing I played on was a slide guitar on a song called Good Day in Hell. And I thank Dwayne Allman every day that I hear that song on the radio for teaching me how to play slide, or else I wouldn't be in the band.
It's amazing. What year did you join the Eagles?
1974. If anybody can remember back that far. I know the 70s, for me, have this smoky haze around my memories for some reason. I don't know why, but...
Who knows? I wanted to ask a guy like you who was in a massively successful band pre-MTV, how MTV initially impacted you. Because, before music videos, I was thinking about this, looking at just your discography, the Eagles' discography. If you're a fan of the Eagles and you're buying these records, you're not on a lot of the records, right? You guys aren't pictured on them. There's imagery, there's artwork. And then if I go to a show, I'm up in the nosebleeds, let's say, I can't really make out what you guys look like. So what did that impact have on you guys once people could put a visual to you guys?
Well, we made videos, 16 millimeter films of Hotel California, A New Kid in Town, and a couple of songs. And before there was MTV, we would send those videos to Europe and Japan and Australia, and they would run them on television ahead of us arriving there to play shows. So we sort of preempted MTV with the visual, but it was a live performance of those songs. So people would know what we looked like and what was coming and what it was going to sound like. And once MTV hit, the visual kind of impact of all the songs and singers and artists became more visual than auditory to me. And the focus became on how cool the video was and how well you could dance and the choreography and Madonna and all that kind of look versus the music itself.
Yeah. Did you guys embrace it? Did you take it seriously? Because at the time, no one probably knew it was going to be this phenomenon, and you guys are already selling at arenas. Did you almost poo-poo the idea of like, oh, now we have to do a video?
I don't think we ever did music videos, to tell you the truth,
right.
other than we did a couple for the long run. I think we did one on the song The Long Run, and I can't tell you why, which we were in a studio just filming us playing in the studio, but we never really produced music videos per se.
Yeah, you didn't have to.
Yeah.
Let's talk about American Rock and Roll, the new album that dropped on Friday. The title track I want to talk about really quick, because I love this. You do such a great job of not only having the song sound great, but also telling a really cohesive story. It almost reminds me of like We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. There's a real, there's a narrative to the song. For those that haven't heard it, can you talk about it?
Yeah, like I said, I was at Woodstock in 1969, saw those incredible artists that were performing there, and realized that not only influenced me with a huge impact, but all the people decades later, all the way up through the grunge years until today, had been influenced by those artists.
Oh,
if
yeah.
you played guitar and you were in rock and roll, you knew those guys, you knew how they sounded, you know how to play stuff. I remember talking to Slash about he loved Jimi Hendrix and knew every guitar solo that Jimi Hendrix had played, and he had studied it. And so all of those people that started back in 69 had influenced all the people through the decades. So I wrote this song. It's a bit of a kind of a rockumentary musically from 1969 through the decades up to where we are today.
Yeah.
And then I brought in Slash, who lives down the street from me, because one of the verses talks about Guns N' Roses, Axl and Slash, and how I thought, well, I'll get him to come in and just play a couple of licks on that verse. Well, when he got there, we started playing. We wound up playing on the whole record together. It was just so much fun. And the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac toured together in the 70s with co-headlining. If they were bigger in one city, they would close the show. If we were bigger in another city, we would close the show. So I called up Mick because he has that perfect feel and perfect early pocket from the 70s. It's a really comfortable, relaxed feel. You can just hear his tracks and know that's Mick Fleetwood. So I used him for the first quarter, maybe the first half of American Rock and Roll. And then as we get into later decades, I brought in Chad Smith from the Chili Peppers, who plays like this 500-pound gorilla, and the whole track just levitates. It just gets more powerful and stronger with his playing. So musically, it kind of transforms from an early 70s sound into a much later feel and pocket with the transition from Fleetwood Mac to, Mick Fleetwood to Chad Smith.
Yeah, you talk about, back in the 70s, co-headlining with Fleetwood and kind of gauging who was more popular in the city. How did you find out you had a hit back then? And the reason I ask is, like, today it's so instantaneous, right? You drop a music video on a Friday, social media is reacting. You can see the streaming numbers on the Spotify or Apple Music. You can watch on YouTube, see the numbers. How did you guys know, like, when you drop Hotel California, you probably have to wait a week or two to see what the charts say, to see what radio spins say, right? Like, how did you know?
Yeah, you could tell by the record sales in a particular area. And you can tell by airplay in a particular area. And if the radio and the record sales were really higher in that city, then you actually won that particular city. You got to close the show, and vice versa. If we were selling more records in that particular town, had higher airplay statistics, then we'd close the show. So we would flip-flop back and forth based on who was selling the most records.
Do you remember, though, just like, aside from the tour, like, let's say you put out Hotel California or any single from the Eagles, right, back in the day. Do you remember what kind of time period it was until you found out, oh, this is doing well or this is not doing well? It must have been...
as soon as we posted on Twitter, we knew. Literally, we had so many people following us. No, it took a while to figure out what it was because you would have to base that on ticket sales, album sales, and radio airplay. And, you'd look at the charts the following week or two, and you'd see yourself climbing up the airplay charts and the sales charts as well, like Billboard. That's the only way you knew where you were in the standings of on a national basis.
It's so funny, things are so fast today. You almost had to be patient. A huge leap of faith, right? Like, I hope they like this song. That's crazy. You're going out on tour. I mentioned Atlantic City you did this past weekend. You're doing a cool event at the Cutting Room here in New York City. Do you know any other cities you're going to be hitting? Because I know there's a number of dates.
I will be working until October, on
There you
and
go.
off. And if you ask me when and where, I have no idea. And the updated website, donfelder.com, you can go there and look under tour schedule, and it's constantly being updated and stuff. But there are some amazing players on this record. I don't know if you mentioned them all. There's like Mick
Sammy
Fleetwood,
Hagar.
Sammy Hagar, Joe Satriani, a brilliant guitar player,
yeah.
Bob Weir, the singer from the Grateful Dead. Peter Frampton's on it with me. There's a ton of players on this record. Steve Gadd, Jim Keltner, great drum player.
Who was the toughest to get?
Nobody. Everybody
said nobody's
everybody I
schedule was
asked
tough.
Jumped on board right away. We didn't have to, chase anybody or beg or plead. I've known most of these people for a long time.
Right.
Played with them, toured with them, recorded with them, played golf with them. Alec Lifeson from Rush is a good friend of mine. We play golf. I even have a picture that I'm going to post very soon after this interview of he and I both playing my white double neck guitar because he played one in his show with Rush. I'm playing one neck and he's playing the other
that's
neck.
awesome.
So I'll post that so you can see that.
That's so cool. I mean, did you want it to feel like a party? Because it almost feels like there's like this revolving door as you go through the track list, right? Of like, who's stopping by next?
Well, that's what it was. The hardest part was to select the right person that I know and how they play to be on the right song. Like, you couldn't put Slash on a ballad. It's just the wrong thing for him to play. His expertise is rock and roll.
Yeah.
Yet, when I was touring with Peter Frampton on the Frampton Guitar Circus, Peter would play this Les Paul and plug it into a Leslie, which is this rotating organ speaker, and it just sounded angelic, ethereal, beautiful. And so when I was working on this song, The Way Things Have to Be, I kept hearing that tone. I said, Peter needs to play that sound on this particular track. So the hardest part of a producer is selecting amongst all this talent and friends who should play on what song. And it worked out really well, I think. It wasn't just a celebrity hit list. It was really a musical selection of who I thought would be the best person to play on that record.
Hey, speaking of guitar, I got to ask you, because it's a topic that comes up not just here on Build, but really just one of my buddies and I are talking music, is this idea that rock is dead, right? Or that rock is not what it once was. And a debate that I have is that, is rock inherently the guitar, or is rock an attitude? Is it a mindset? I mean, how would you define it? Do you have to be playing guitar for something to be rock, or can you be a rock star just based off the attitude?
Well, Billy Joel would probably argue with you that you have to play a guitar to be able to be a rock artist. I think rock is something that has been in mutated form over all the decades. If you go way back to the early black blues artists that influenced the early rock artists, including Elvis Presley, and all the migration across the decades, it starts back with the earliest music in America. And it's gone through so many different forms, and until the electric guitar became front and foremost, that decade or decades may be dwindling. Don't know. I mean, but right now, today, you see more people playing Guitar Hero than you do see playing guitar. And if those kids would spend that much time playing guitar, they'd be great guitarists instead of banging around on this little plastic toy, Exactly. So I think it's not necessarily an instrument. I think in the past it's been associated with instruments. As a matter of fact, this guitar I played here at the Beacon Theater about 4 or 5 years ago with Steve Miller. And at the end of my show, I always play Hotel California. My guitar tech comes walking out on stage with this white double neck guitar, and the audience recognizes it and goes, yeah! They know what's coming from looking at that guitar. It's like iconically connected.
Oh, totally.
The guy that's the main curator for the Metropolitan Museum of Art happens to be sitting in the audience, and he sees that, and he gets the idea of the exhibit that's now on exhibit at the Met. From seeing that response, he said, there's a great connection between the instruments and the audience and the song. Yeah. So, it was just a pleasure to be part of the Met as well. But I think that era of rock and roll is really highly associated with guitar.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And speaking of that exhibit, you were joking you're going to be working till October. The exhibit is actually available through October. I believe it started either April 1st or today, maybe, and it's available if you're in the New York area to check that out, which you have to if you're a music fan. It sounds like so cool. Let's turn it over to the audience for a couple questions here. First is going to come from right up front.
Have your unique improvisational guitar skills enabled you to stay in front of the emerging musical trends in rock? And were they self-taught, or did you learn from many others throughout your career?
I studied a lot of different styles of music, from country music to rock and roll to when I was here in New York, I had a jazz fusion rock band. And we would walk out on stage and play the beginning of a song, a couple of verses. And when it came to the solo, it could go as long as you wanted it to go, as long as you felt like playing. And I had always really respected the skills of jazz artists. To be able to walk out, they don't play the same solo every night. They just open it up and let it go. As a matter of fact, I drove from Gainesville up here to New York to see Miles Davis at the Village Gate with Tony Williams, a 17-year-old jazz drummer, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Wayne Shorter, and Miles. I'm sitting in the audience. The band goes up, starts playing. Dun, 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 dun. Herbie takes a solo. Wayne Shorter takes a solo. Miles not even on stage yet. He casually, very coolly walks up while the band's still playing. He stands on stage with his back to the audience. He plays 3 notes, and those 3 notes just kill you. His selection, and then he starts playing, his melodies, and they're just pouring out of him. So to me, that was one of the highest forms of creativity, is to develop the skills on an instrument to be able to just play what you love, what's coming out of you. And so it's really benefited me over the years in the studio, live, and all sorts of ways. I'm glad I found that skill.
Thanks for your question. We have time for one final studio audience question. It'll come from over here.
Hi. I know you've traveled all around the world. I was wondering what your favorite city that you've been to was, or your most memorable city that you've been to.
Well, every city has memories, some of them good, some of them bad. I think one of the most memorable times I've had is being on stage. We were opening or playing, I think, second or third bill in Wembley Stadium in London, and Elton John was headlining. There's probably 110,000 people on this field and up in this multi-tiered stadium. And if you've ever been to a baseball game and you see a guy hit a ball and then you hear the delay of the sound later, that's called the speed of sound. It's slower than the speed of light. So I'm standing on stage and I can watch these audiences jump up and down, and the waves going across this field and across the stadiums really was the first time I'd actually realized what the speed of sound was in music, the delay that went on there. It's like the wave you see at baseball games or football games now. And I think that stuck with me in my mind for all these years.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, Don, we're unfortunately out of time, but I just want to thank you again for stopping by Build today. And just a quick reminder, American Rock and Roll is out and available everywhere, and you can head out online to check out those tour dates. Don Felder, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.